So I have this friend, wonderful friend, who's a marvelous dancer. She's danced all over the world, actually. And so she was getting on a bus, and so I was waving goodbye to her. And so she said later that as the bus pulled away, and she was looking out the back window, and she said that I looked sad. She said she said after you were, you had this, this, my typical smile, right? And then the bus went in, so that she said it faded into a kind of sadness. And she said, I thought about it. And so her name is Sally, and she was an absolutely brilliant person. I mean, quite literally. IQ was much higher than mine. So she said, I was looking, and she said, I thought this real sadness. And she said, I thought, if I spend enough time, I'm going to spend some time on this, and I can just figure out exactly what is going on with him, and I can help him solve whatever problem he happens to have. So when she said that, I totally believed her. Right? That was the thing. I mean, it's like, I didn't think that was BS, I thought, she could do that. She actually could do that. That's how smart she is. She could actually sit down, and if she really sat down, she said, Lisa, I'm just going to sit down and I'm just going to figure out what your problem is, and I'm just going to figure it out, You're right. So I thought, maybe you might know somebody you would think is just that intelligent. That's what the Buddha did. That's actually what the Buddha did. She, by the way, didn't do it. She was never able to settle down and spend enough time thinking about one person, this person. She had a mind sort of like mine, very, very fast. But that's actually what the Buddha did. And, and we've never stopped talking about it for almost 2,600 years. He sat down and he figured it out. He figured out the whole 9 yards. Or is it 12? Is it the whole 9 yards? I'm losing. He figured the whole thing out. And and this is the truth. This is kind of by way of confession. I decided that it would be good to talk about this in 2003. And I did. And from that, I wrote this book, The Bare Bones of the Buddha's Teaching. That was 2003, and I don't think I've repeated that series since. Sort of like I graduated. I got, beyond this core teaching. Actually, it's not entirely untrue. I mean, I did become much more engaged in and fascinated with really Mahayana Buddhism. Not to say that we don't go back to this, because of course we do. I mean, everybody talks about the core Dharma. But we've never really gone back through it. And so just to share a little bit with you, when I was in Lumbini, Nepal 3 years ago, we had been reading in our little Wednesday night group. We've been going through the Satipatthana Sutra with a very famous book by the monk Anilaya. So when I got to Lumbini, I think maybe this next night I went in. The lights were out, of course, because they don't have electricity. They have electricity every once in a while. They print it in the newspaper. They print in the newspaper when the lights are on. I swear to the Lord above. Like for the whole week, they let you know when there'll be electricity and not. So that just tells you. But anyway, so the lights were off and we were all sitting there in the darkness. But he was reading from the very same book that we were studying here Wednesday night, that Wednesday night. And so it was interesting to me. I realized eventually that they just go through the whole thing, right? From beginning, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the mindfulness, and then they repeat it, So they maybe spend 4 months doing it, and then they come back in 4 months and do it. They do the same somewhat at the Forest Refuge, right? They repeat. They just go, the teachers, they have rotating teachers, but they all just come back. So we have perhaps been remiss in doing that, and maybe not But it did occur to me when I was at the Forest Refuge. In fact, now I'm listening to them talking about the same old crap. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean that. See, that just slipped out. That was called an inside thought that I got confused and made it an outside thought. So anyway, no, they go through it, and it was quite good. It was, and I'm sitting there listening to one of the teachers, and she's quite wonderful. And so I thought, maybe we should go back and do this, right? So we are going to go back and do this. And so I think that as much as you can commit to this, I would suggest that you try to kind of come back for a few Sundays in a row. So we're going to go through the whole. Basically, this is what I call the classical teaching, the classical Buddhism. It's basically the core of the Theravadan tradition. In the Mahayana and the Vajrayana, they all traditions of Buddhism, they all talk about the Four Noble Truths, but not really in the same way that in the Theravadan it's just really this is it. We go over it, and we go over it, and go over it. So go back to what I said about my friend Sally, looking at this face that got sad because I didn't know anyone was looking at me. And she says, I'm just gonna sit down and think about you, and I'm just gonna figure you out. I'll figure out what it is you need. If she'd figured that out, that was in 1973, as I said. I wasted a lot of years because she never did figure it out. So the legend is that the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, and with the morning star he awakened, and then. It's not quite, you can imagine it in many different ways, but it is certainly the truth that the Buddha said that the awakening does not come without the opening of the intuitive mind, intuitive intelligence. So we could certainly well imagine that it's not like paradoxical or even incongruous that out of his awakening came this incredible blueprint. So I always call it's a spiritual blueprint. I always call it somewhat. Rajneesh said that that we are a spiritual laboratory. I like that, right? So he says that a scientist has a laboratory outside in the West, right? A scientist looks through a microscope and blah, blah, blah. And I know a great deal about that because, as you all know, I'm very scientific. That's a joke. But that was a very smart thing that guy said, Rajneesh. He says that the truth is, that's a kind of a Western, really, in a sense, right? It's really analogous that we're very, very focused on the outside in the West, and and we have created amazing things in terms of the mind that is able to put people on the moon, for instance. So, and the East, to some extent, it didn't seem like they were that interested in the outside, They're very interested in exploring the terrain of the inside. So he said that we are the spiritual laboratory. So I like that a lot. And so when I think about us being the spiritual laboratory, I mean you are. The laboratory is inside of you. The person who came, I think, closest to writing the definitive blueprint for spiritual work, for the whole journey, is the Buddha. And really what he saw when his mind opened completely. So the story is that after he awakened, you all probably know most of this, or probably none of it. So the story is, that after he's awakened, so I think he sits there under the tree for 7 days or something. Probably didn't have much to do, right? And he didn't hurt his toe. See, like if it had been Eric, right? If it had been Eric would not have been able to be contemplating so much because he'd be concerned with his toe. By the way, you forgot it's the other toe. You wish. Uh, See that we have right here. We just have this amazing situation here, right? We have somebody who is working between pain and suffering, right? No, you're just suffering. Damn. So as you all know, that before the Buddha had his individual and alone experience of sitting, he was working with these other yogis, and they were doing all of these ascetic practices. And so he left them, and they thought he was really copping out, right? He wasn't starving himself anymore. What a wuss he was, right? He wasn't starving himself, and so he wasn't about near death, and so he wasn't sleeping on stones or walking on hot coals. So when they saw him, they met him, and they were at first going to just kind of like say, well, they're going to have nothing to do with him. But they finally said, well, let's go over and say hello to him. I've been calling him Sid lately. Sid Harta. I think that's very good. Who thought of that? Who thought of Sid? We're calling him Sid Harta. Right, David? So he comes up to them, and they at first they're a little bit standoffish because they're really kind of mad at him. But then they sit and listen to him, and they hear the Dharma. They hear the first teaching. They say it's the first turning of the Dharma wheel. So this is the what we're going to talk about for the next few weeks. It's very interesting it's very fascinating to me to start a teaching with the idea that all beings, all human beings who are who operate out of the conditioned mind suffer. I've thought many times, it occurs to me that the only person who really gets that would probably be someone who doesn't suffer, right? What would we look like to someone who is free of suffering? It seems to me that and I think I wrote this. It seems to me that probably to the Buddha, suffering was not normal. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing to think, right? It hit me one day when I was just thinking about it, that suffering probably was not normal to him. So what would it look like to someone if suffering was no longer normal, to look around at everybody and on a scale of 1 to 10, some of us are on a 2 and some of us are on a 6, and Eric right now is on a 7, 3. But to have that idea that suffering is not normal is radical to me. I think it's radical. I was thinking, I think what is extraordinary about us, in a way, as humans, if we've been watching the tornado in Oklahoma, 13,000 homes were destroyed in 35 minutes or less, right? And so where do we go with that? So like the next day, I think was the day after that, or 2 days after that, was when two guys mutilated the British soldier on the street and hacked him to death. And the day after that, someone stabbed a French soldier in the throat. We could go on with this, right? I mean, so let me just hush, and does anyone want to stand up and talk? I mean, we could stretch back to Nazi Germany, and 6 million Jews, gypsies, homosexual. The estimate of people in the Gulag in Russia is 20 million. The suffering that we experience as human beings, it seems absolutely normal, doesn't it? I mean, it's like it's as if it goes with the privilege of being human. It doesn't even occur to us in a way. I mean, it's like, when you read in the newspaper, well, the tsunami hit. What was that, 110,000? Well, you read the news, 110,000 people died yesterday. Isn't that something? We go on with our lives. Certainly, as long as it doesn't really hit us. At home, we grasp that there's something really amazing in terms of this human existence, but as long as it doesn't really impact us, right where we live, so to speak, then when we're a little bit separate from it. But the Buddha said what he saw was that ultimately no one can escape it, because, as I said last week, unfortunately we're in a human body that is slowly dying. How many people would have an issue with that? So I was going to read. This is kind of a wonderful. This is from the Pali scripture. It's really profound. This is what he said about suffering. There will come a time when the mighty ocean will dry up, vanish, and be no more. Now, that's probably not next week, right? But this is true. It is really true. There will come a time when the mighty ocean will dry up, vanish, and be no more. There will come a time when the mighty earth will be devoured by fire, perish, and be no more. The earth will be devoured by fire, perish, and be no more. It's interesting that he didn't say it will freeze. He's pretty smart. I guess probably it is true that we will go closer and closer to the sun. But we don't have to worry about that, right? Taryn, you don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about that. I mean, we're fine, right? I'm not going to be here when that happens. But, this is what this man said, but yet there will be no end to the suffering of beings who, obstructed by ignorance and ensnared by craving, are hurrying and hastening through this round of rebirths. Lordy. Did you get that? I mean, he says even the ocean will dry up and the earth will be devoured by fire, but there will be no end to this endless round of human beings who are ensnared by craving and blocked by ignorance, obstructed by ignorance, hastening through this round of rebirth. Now, for us in the West, when I read this, this round of rebirth, to me that means every minute. We don't have to worry about being born in another body. We don't have to worry about reincarnation. You can take it or leave it. But how many times are we born every moment, every day, every week? So the round of rebirth applies to one day, let alone 1 year or a lifetime. This is a book that I was looking at. I thought, well, what the hell did I say about dukkha? So I read this last night, and I thought, how many people saw the movie As Good as It Gets? I love that movie. You remember at the end where he gives her a kiss? He gives her this big kiss, and she just kind of pats him on the back, right? And they're both a little bit uncomfortable, and he says, I know I can do better than that, right? And then he gives her another. He gives her a really good one, right? A really good kiss. So that when I read this last night, I had that same thought. I thought, I can do better than that. So I'd like to rewrite it, but it's already written, so what are you going to do? So the definition of the Pali definition of dukkha, there are different definitions, or it has different meanings. One meaning that I really like is that it's an axle that's that's out of whack, and the other one is it's a bone that's pulled out of the joint. That would be the description of dukkha. And so I had this thought that, in a sense, we all have psychic slip discs, and we were born with them. What is it that causes us to suffer? The Buddha said, he just absolutely described it. Obstructed by ignorance, right? And craving. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that at a later date. With Bradley and Wendy will talk a little bit about desire next week. I wonder. I wonder how much we are able to bear the idea that we suffer. It seems to me that, the Buddha said that he didn't know that he was enlightened. He wasn't sure of it. He wasn't sure that he had awakened until he totally understood the truth of suffering. Right? I really think that's very interesting. He didn't say. I mean, he didn't see Jesus. He didn't see Allah. He didn't see God. He didn't see Jehovah. He didn't see anything other than the truth of suffering. That's the way he said he knew that he had awakened. Which is also why I say I suspect that he saw it, that it's not normal. I mean, in other words, if I'm successful at denying the reality that something in me is always, always looking for a better moment, every moment, this moment is never good enough. I mean, if that's really the truth, that that there's going to be a better moment. If I can just hang on and wait for it, if I succeed in that mindset, then what are the chances that I'm going to change that? They're not good. So he said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. The good news about the fact that he sat down and spent a lot of time thinking about this is that he concluded that you don't have to suffer. It's amazing. I mean, I'm not aware of another religion that says that. Most religions, they say, you'll go to heaven. Suffer now, and then, and be a good girl or boy. Nancy, be a real good girl. Suffer now and endure this veil of tears, right? And if you are a good person, believe in whatever it is you're supposed to believe in, then you'll go to the happy land. Happy place. And all of your relatives will be there. I mean, most... The thing is, like, I had that thought before, no, that would not necessarily work for me. So he didn't say that, right? He didn't suggest that at all. he suggested that suffering is not normal. It's not normal. And it's our number one, our extraordinary talent at ignoring or denying the fact that we do suffer. Number one, that creates, an almost impossible situation because, again, the degree to which you're successful at your denial, it's going to perpetuate it forever. And my experience with most of us is that we are artists when it comes to denial. We're just artists. We're the best. Yeah. So I wanted to just say, I don't know if I may say something else intelligent in a minute. I keep waiting for something intelligent to come out. I think it's really important to remember that it's really like you start with this yucky thing. I'll read it. I mean, it is yucky. I mean, it reminds me of me. Well, I'll give you just a little example. And what is decay? The decay of all sentient beings as they go through a process of growing old, becoming frail, gray, wrinkled, the failing of their vital force, the wearing out of their senses. And then he says this, and you're going to like this. This is kind of like hopeful right here. Cindy, just get ready. This is my favorite. Did you ever see in the world a man or a woman 80, 90, or 100 years old? Right off the bat, you know, this is not going to come out good, is it? Right? Nope. Did you ever see in the world a man or a woman 80, 90, or 100 years old, frail, crooked as a gable roof, bent down, supported on a staff with tottering steps, infirm, youth long since fled? I don't like that one right there. Youth long since fled. With broken teeth, and in my case, missing teeth. I told everyone the other night I had to eat slowly because I'm missing a great number of teeth. Broken teeth, gray, and scanty hair. Well, see, now that one I don't have to worry about. I do not have scanty hair. How's your foot? Suffering? Are you suffering a little bit? No, I know you're not. He says scanty hair or bald-headed. Wrinkled with blotched limbs. Okay. It's like, really, Travis, wipe that smile off your face. Really and truly, just think about your whatever it is, your Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all the wonderful Hinduism. You just don't read this stuff very much, right? I mean, do you? Did you ever see in the world a man or woman 80, 90, or 100 years old, frail, crooked, with a gable roof bent down, supported on a staff with tottering steps, infirm, youth long since fled, with broken teeth, gray and scanty hair, bald-headed, wrinkled, with blotched limbs? And did the thought never come to you that you are also subject to decay and you cannot escape that? See, we don't think that very much, do we? Right? I mean, it's a fleeting thought, right? It comes in, but we get rid of it as fast as we can. And I say, if such a depressing thought comes to our minds, we get rid of it as quickly as we can, and it seems abnormal to contemplate such awful stuff. And yet, what is more important than that, contemplating that? I mean, really, what's more important than embracing and understanding and knowing that this is the reality? It's not like, oh, well, well, excuse me, I shall slash my wrist, right? It isn't that you embrace that and understand it, right? And then you say, oh, well, then never mind. I don't want to live. I'll commit suicide when I'm 40 or 50 or when you keep changing. Right? Well, no, I'll go for 60. I'll go for. But the profundity of his teaching is that you can only really transcend that if you can embrace it and understand it. So in other words, if you say, oh, this is going to happen to me, therefore what should I do? What's my program? So he said your program is to see exactly what it is in you that is causing you to suffer. See it. See exactly what it is in you and in me that causes us to suffer, that causes us to get up every morning and before we know it, we're off to the races, lost in thoughts, lost in desire. I want this and I don't want that. I want this and I really I do not want that. I love this and I really hate that. And we're just gone. What can come from that? I want this and I hate this. What can come from that? Suffering. So, he said, we have this very thing that causes us to suffer. And this very thing that causes us to suffer is the conditioned mind. This very thing that causes us to suffer is the very thing that can lead us to freedom. That's amazing, right? The one thing that is the big problem that you have, thank God I don't have it, that I have. The one thing that we have that causes us to suffer is a mind that is conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion. And that's the very thing that can lead us out of greed, hatred, and delusion to freedom. So I have this feeling. I'm going to read one more thing to you all. This is my latest favorite thing. I just want to say that I could rattle on for another hour. Easily. This is like an extraordinary. This is an extraordinary subject. One that I don't talk about very much, suffering. But I'm not going to talk much longer. And I'm going to maybe. What are you? I wish. You know what? Don't you think you're paying too much attention to that toe? That causes suffering. So you all remember last week. I'll just repeat this because it's one of the brilliant. It really is one of the smartest things. Shinchen Young. As far as I know, he coined this, but he said that suffering is pain times resistance. Right? So it is really true that to the degree that Eric is able to just be with the discomfort and the pain and not resist it, he's not going to suffer. He's not going to suffer. And it's as I said, when the hammers were going, the cacophony was just unbelievable. I thought it was just. I didn't have my hearing aid on. And to the degree that I mean, I could watch this little core wanting this little sense of self wanting to come up. This story. Well, why don't they? Do they have to do it right now? Could they just? But really, to the degree that you just absolutely just let it pass through you, as if you are just space rather than this solidified me, this sense of me that's like this little solid thing inside that doesn't want anything to interrupt, it's perfect day. It's as I said, remember when I was talking about getting mad at the wind, you all remember that when at the picnic I got very angry with the wind. I was furious with the wind because it was blowing my stuff on the ground. And I just thought, oh my God, what is that? What is that? I mean, it was actually an imagined person inside. And then when I saw that, it just went away. All right, so this is this is one of the more brilliant things I have read in the past year. I mean, this is by somebody, his name is J. Garfield. And he wrote a book. He wrote a commentary on one of the great works in maybe the greatest work in Mahayana Buddhism, by Nagarjuna. I won't even try to pronounce it. I really mean that. I think I will try to pronounce it. It's unbelievable. It's like it's Madhya Madhyamadhyamikarika. I didn't make that up. I mean, I probably messed it up, but that kind of means the fundamental verses of the middle way, but blah, blah. You don't need to remember that. Okay, so this is what this man said. I wrote this down in 2 different places. This is actually kind of going to be more, in some ways, appropriate to next week. Bradley, you better remember this as you start trying to talk about the cause, what got us in all of this mess, right? Some of you don't know that you're in a mess. We are this first sentence just completely got me going. I said it over and over. We are born with dispositions to reify. Kathy she squunched her face and, Rob, what are you doing? Is that going to?
I'm thinking about reifying.
Yes, it's an extraordinary sentence. It's actually the root of our problem. Every human being's problem. It's actually the cause of ignorance. Wow, it is. We reify, we solidify, we make, God in heaven is a reifying. If I believe I have a self inside, that's a reifying. We reify everything. You remember, I'm always talking about making a nest right? We learn something and make a nest out of it. We can't learn something without solidifying it and then relying on it, right? That's reifying. That's reification. It's like making it, taking a truth and making it concrete. It's no longer this ineffable truth, right? It's just this thing. If I need to, I've got to put it into words, so I have to reify it, right? I can't, God forbid that I would just try to live with it. We're born with dispositions to reify. It's our human nature, everybody. It's really, Nancy, it's a problem. So Nisargadatta says to Nancy, he says, Nancy, you are the absolute. And what's your mind going to do? It's going to, I am the absolute. And you've reified it, right? And it's gone. It's gone. You are pure awareness, Cindy. Cindy says, I'm pure awareness. I get that. I can remember that. I'm going to memorize that. I am pure. You have now reified it, and now it's dead. It's no longer living. So reification takes the life out of all truth. And we all do that. I mean, right? Is there someone who doesn't take the life out of truth momentarily? Diana? Did you ever do it? We do. We do. It's sort of like it's something about our nature with what the Buddhists call the discriminating mind, a mind that divides everything into good and bad, up and down. So we reify. So here's what he said. This is a wonderful paragraph. We are born with dispositions to reify, to crave, and to grasp, all of which on this analysis leads directly to suffering, dukkha, what we're talking about today. May I read that one more time? We are born with dispositions to reify, to crave, and to grasp, all of which on this analysis leads directly to suffering, to the point, Mark, of wanting what we cannot have, of not wanting what we do have, of grasping onto permanence in an impermanent world, of cherishing our own existence and interest in a world where we are minor affairs, and of grasping for independence and freedom in a conditioned universe. Well, so we don't have to do any of that. That's the good news. We don't have to do any of that. But as long as we have this illusion of this me that has to live forever, just think about it, right? I mean, then, of course, in other words, we're relentlessly trying to create permanence, right? Every moment we're trying to create permanence. We're trying to be permanent. And so who in here is comfortable being impermanent? Right? I mean, it's possible. The Buddha did it. Many people do it. But so the craving comes out of this need to solidify our mind. We need to solidify. And then, so he says that this is what causes suffering. And it's actually what the Buddha said. So we don't have to do any of that. So the Buddha said the way that you don't have to do that is through something he called the Eightfold Path, which we will get to. And that's all I have to say.